Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah.
Alhamdulillah, all praise be to God. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. I bear witness there is no other God but God and His no partners. Assalamu alaikum everyone. So there were a lot of things I wanted to talk about. It's been a long time since I've been here and given a sermon, but I had to pick one topic, and I figured of all the different things that I would want to talk about, I think one of the most important things to talk about right now would be this subject of dietary prohibitions. So we know from the Quran that God has commanded us things in the Quran that we can eat and things that we're forbidden from eating, and this is very important for us for our salvation. So when we look at the things that we can eat from, there's two types of foods that are available to us. There's crops and there are livestock. And we understand that crops and livestock are treated very differently, especially based on the Quran. For example, when we cut the crops, or we cut the vegetables, or when we have fruits and grains, when we cut a slice of cheese or butter or tofu or a cake, we don't pronounce God's name as we slice it, right? So why is that? Yet when you sacrifice an animal, you have to pronounce God's name on it, even though when you get the meat from outside for any animal, it doesn't matter if they pronounce the name of God or not, but you're supposed to pronounce God's name upon it. But you don't have to do that for rice and tofu and butter and all these things, right? And so why is that? So the idea behind that is obviously you're actually sacrificing an animal, and so that animal has a soul that is going to God at the time you're sacrificing it. It's going to its creator. So the Messenger of the Covenant explains more about that in detail, so I'll leave that for later. But there's some verses prior to that I guess we can reflect on. So there's Surah 6, verse 136. It talks about abusing God's provisions, right? And this God says, they even set aside a share of God's provisions of crops and livestock, saying this share belongs to God according to the claim that this share belongs to our idols. However, what was set aside for their idols never reached God, but what was set aside for God invariably went to their idols. Miserable indeed is their judgment. And then it says, religious innovations condemned. 138 says, they said, these are livestock and crops that are prohibited. No one shall eat them except whomever we permit, so they claimed. They also prohibited the riding of certain livestock. And then it says, even the livestock they ate, they never pronounced God's name as they sacrificed them. Such are the innovations attributed to Him. He will surely requite them for their innovations. So if we look at this verse, for example, we see that these people had prohibited livestock and crops, and prohibited people from using it. But then God, even though God is talking about livestock and crops, we see that where it says even the livestock they ate, here there's no mention of crops. It just talks about the livestock that when they sacrificed them, they didn't pronounce God's name on them either. And these are religious innovations. So why is it that we can't sacrifice crops and only livestock, even though we're supposed to pronounce God's name on anything we eat? Surah 6, verse 118 says, you shall eat from that upon which God's name has been pronounced, if you truly believe in His revelations. So we're supposed to pronounce God's name on anything and everything that we eat, whether it's crops or it's food or anything, right? Dairy, everything, you have to pronounce God's name on anything we eat. But when you sacrifice an animal, only then you're supposed to pronounce God's name on it as you sacrifice the animal, but not for crops. Yeah, I think we get it. And verse 6, Surah 6, verse 121 says, "Do not eat from that upon which the name of God has not been mentioned, for it is an abomination. The devil inspired their allies to argue with you. If you obey them, you will be idol worshippers." And then the footnote says, "Dietary prohibitions instituted by other than God represent idolatry." Right? So let's think about that. Dietary prohibitions instituted other than God represent idolatry. So why is this so significant? Because we have taken the step, we have taken the initiative to discard all the idols in our lives. We have decided not to worship Muhammad or Ali or any of the saints, or Jesus for that matter, and decided to worship God alone. But Satan's still trying his level best to try to get us to convert us into idol worshippers one way or another. And we understand that, somehow he has succeeded in converting a lot of people. So what happens when people follow dietary prohibitions that are instituted by other people? They idolize those people, and thus Satan gets them. I always used to think about dietary prohibitions, and I was saying, like, yeah, we should prohibit everything, which was wrong. But I was saying, yeah, we should prohibit anything that will sort of hint towards idol worship, right? And so I saw a lot of people prohibiting a whole lot of things that are not prohibited by God, just because they said, yeah, that could be an idol worship. For example, around Christmas time, people sell candies, and candies will have like different colors or pictures on them, and they're somehow connected to idol worship. They're like, okay, well, if this candy is sold and this has this sign of idol worship, this is haram, and so you think, yeah, because you want to be so righteous, you want to be better than anybody else, you push yourself to the extreme. But that is wrong, because Satan will always try to push you to the extreme. We have to have the balance, right? For example, there's nothing wrong with doing 6 prayers if you're just praying to God, right? And you think it's harmless. But the idea is that you have to do exactly what God says. If you go above or less than that, you're more or less than that, you're following someone other than God. So that is the idea. And so we have to do just what God said and just stop there. Not try to exceed that or not try to make reductions. So Satan is very sneaky, We know how he lies to people, right? We know how he got our parents, Adam and Eve, evicted from paradise. We know that it wasn't the apple that they ate, but it was an allegorical description of how they broke God's commandments. But he got them to lie. He got them deceived by lying to them and tricked them into doing something wrong, and by presenting it as something that was very righteous. So this is such an important topic, and one of the reasons why I also decided to talk about this is, it's mentioned in one of the 38 appendices that are written by the Messenger of the Covenant, right? And if we read what's in the appendix, it's very simple. It says the Quran teaches us that God is extremely displeased with those who prohibit anything that was not specifically prohibited in the Quran. So the upholding of any prohibitions not specifically mentioned in the Quran is tantamount to idolatry. Such prohibitions represent some other God besides God. If you worship God alone, you will uphold His teachings alone and honor the commandments and prohibitions instituted only by Him. The absolute specificity of dietary prohibitions in the Quran is best illustrated in 6:145 to 146. We learn from these 2 verses that when God prohibits quote-unquote meat, He prohibits meat and nothing else. And when He prohibits fat, that is what He specifically prohibits. these two verses inform us that the meat of the pigs is prohibited, not the fat. Obviously, God knew that in many countries, lard would be used in baked goods and other food products, and that such usage does not render the food haram prohibited. So the Quran specifically prohibits 4 meats, and the verses are mentioned. And then it concludes with 6:145, say, I do not find in what was revealed to me anything prohibited for any eater, unless it is 1 carrion, 2 running blood, 3 the meat of pigs, where it is unclean, and meat blasphemously dedicated to other than God. If one is forced to eat these without being deliberate or malicious, then your Lord is forgiver, most merciful. So the appendix ends here, and I think that we should probably take a pause at this point and repent. Alhamdulillah. Praise be to God. I bear witness there's no other God but God, and He has no partners. So, one of the things that I wanted to talk about, which actually brought me to this, was that when this subject sort of turned into a topic that was kind of disputed among the people, there was a lot of confusion around it. And there was a lot of debate around it, and it was one of those subjects that I think I kind of thought that I understood, and I tried to reason with myself, and I would go online through these long discussions, and just, at the end, you'd still be confused because, it would just be contentious and confusing. And I guess the reason behind it would be that we did not have, although there were very straightforward Quranic verses available, but I think what was lacking, for me at least, was a clear explanation of some of the terminologies that were used for these verses that are described for dietary prohibitions. And I'll get to what I mean about that. So recently, there was an audio that came to surface from the Messenger of the Covenant that kind of cleared up the confusion for me. And God willing, I would like us all to take a moment to just examine that. We know that because Quran is our only source of religious guidance, we understand that the Messenger of the Covenant, preached from the Quran, and his job was to clarify this information. I mean, dietary prohibitions was one of the things that he decided to include in the appendices for that very reason too. And so it's important for us, in order for us to not be considered idol worshippers, that we get it right. I mean, sometimes people say that these are things that are little, and we shouldn't care about that. But the problem is that Satan doesn't have a scale to say what's little and what's not. It's about the principle. And so if Satan can prove that you and I are, God forbid, idol worshippers, that's it, then his job is over and we're doomed. And everything that we would do from that point on would not be counted, right? So it's sort of nothing, but when you think about it, it's everything, because if one of those things can be used against you to nullify everything you have ever done, then there's really no point. I mean, we're just wasting our lives here, and just it's going to be regret. So it's important that we get the concepts right, no matter how little they seem. It's not about division or causing chaos, but it's about understanding our religion, because at the end of the day, you and I are going to go alone as individuals to, answer for everything we have done. There's not going to be a group or a group of friends or anything like that, we all have to answer for the things that we stood for. And so we have to understand what these prohibitions are in order for us to not be considered idol worshippers. So, God willing, I'll play it, and then I have the transcript on screen also because it's kind of hard to hear for a lot of people, especially the commentary in the background. Some of it you might not be able to hear, but at least anything that the messenger is saying is pretty clear, and then I'll highlight that.
Anyway, the Quran lists exactly 4 things that are prohibited. Anything beyond that is okay. The 4 things are animals that die of themselves. And in Surah 5 we're given details that even if the animal falls from height or goes to death, there's something wrong with that animal. Possibly. So animals that die of themselves without interference from humans are prohibited. Pork, meat. Specifically meat. Running blood. And the 4th thing is animals dedicated to other than God. Because we have to mention the name of God if you do the slaughtering yourself. Because you are taking permission from the creator of this animal to end the life of this animal. Now, if you dedicate it to Saint Jude, to Saint Francis, you're saying that Saint Francis is the creator of this chicken or sheep.
What about all store-bought meat that hasn't been dedicated to
That's fine. Okay, what's the words of the Quran? The words of the Quran are very clear in saying dedicated to other than God. So the question is the meat in Safeway or Lucky's dedicated to other than God? Yes or no?
Most of it's commercially processed and it's shot and
Right. In other words, it is not dedicated to other than God.
only been dedicated to Mammon, the God of money.
It was not dedicated to anything. But
The labor involved is going to be.
you mean there's no labor?
No. If you chop, peel, art, and there's a labor involved. It's not
There's a human being. No. Dedication means I killed this animal in the name of.
Yeah, exactly.
Or for Saint Francis. If we mention any name other than God, then it is dedicated to other than God. Therefore it is haram. These are the 4 prohibitions.
So I think I'll just pause here because this part here actually he talks about pretty much everything that we needed to talk about. So the first part that I wanted to highlight here that he says is that the 4th thing is the animals dedicated to other than God. Because we have to mention the name of God if you do this slaughtering yourselves, because you're taking permission from the creator of this animal to end the life of this animal. So we can see here that this would not apply to rice and crops and tofu and cake and whatnot, because those things are already dead. I mean, even if you take a plant and you start chopping it through, you have seeds. I mean, those seeds can still grow and you're not really killing anything per se, right? And so the idea is that is something that's done only on animal products and not on things like plants. So when you say food dedicated to other than God, yeah, that includes any food that's dedicated to other than God, but food that can be dedicated to other than God, right? Things that you do kill that can go back to God and you're pronouncing God's name on it, right? And so he clearly mentions here what the dedication means. He says, so what does dedication mean? When you say food dedicated to other than God, right? One must say, because some verses say food and then other verses say animals, and then people say, no, is it food or is it animals? But I think the only thing, if it's clear to us, is that what does dedication even mean, right? Does dedication mean if I say that this thing is for so-and-so and this dedication? No, because the messenger clearly says, no, dedication means I kill this animal with the name of Saint Francis. If you mention any name other than God, then it is dedicated to other than God, right? So dedication means you're actually killing an animal and sending it back to its creator, and you're saying that Saint Francis is its creator, for example. And so you can't do that, it should be dedicated, and that's what makes it prohibited. So that's what cleared it, at least for me. And so now if we look at the verses, I don't see any contradiction in the verses either, because one is talking, so 6:145 is talking about meat of animals blasphemously dedicated to other than God, right? 2:172 is talking about animals dedicated to other than God, right? And 5:3 is also talking about animals dedicated to other than God. And then 16:115, he only prohibits for you dead animals, blood, the meat of pigs, and food which is dedicated to other than God. So naturally you can see, okay, which kind of food can be dedicated to other than God? Of course, I can't dedicate rice because I can kill it and send it back to its creator and pronounce a name of an idol on it. So it doesn't matter. So God willing, with this, I just pray and hope that all of us can try to make it. May God accept all our works from us, because this test is not very easy. When we came to this world, we thought that we were going to make it, and we also thought that we were very smart, among other things. We thought we were very righteous, and of course we're going to worship God alone, but we also thought we were very smart, and this test was going to be very easy. But we know from the get-go how Satan duped Adam and Eve, that he's going to come from the right and the left and the front and the back, and he's going to test you from all angles. He's going to provoke your ego. He's going to try so many different things. So it is really, really crucial for all of us to, defeat those factors when it comes to your salvation. Don't look at other factors like peer pressure and ego. For me, it was very hard to accept too, because I took a very hard stand on it and, went quite far with it. So, but when I saw the information from the messenger, I had to think about my soul and make the right decision. So, hopefully, it helps us in our soul growth, and hopefully all of us can, God willing, make the right decision and make it to paradise. Let's pray.